Western Europe is not the best place to be right now, especially not if you have the money to leave. Because unlike 10 years ago, the predicted deindustrialization is no longer just a conspiracy theory, and neither will be like what is about to come in the next 10 years. The mass media is telling those mid-curved morons that everything is not as bad, and actually, we are living in the best Europe that has ever existed. Don't try to argue with those people, it's absolutely a waste of time. They will always bring some bullshit argument like, but in Sweden. Instead, me and you should focus on how to save our own asses and let late capitalism take care of the rest. Too many Europeans have been mistakenly believing that, once COVID stops, once the Ukraine war ends, if we get past this, if we get over that, then finally things are going back to normal and start improving again. Wrong! The underlying problem here is not a temporary one, but a fundamental one. Everything else, like the culture war between left and right or the war between rich and poor, are just mere symptoms. The core problem here is that every system, every empire and every organism has a lifespan. Capitalism, as a global system, has reached the end of its lifespan. And with end, I don't mean everything collapses tomorrow and the apocalypse starts. Instead, over the next few decades, capitalism will slowly morph into a completely brand new monster, and I have a good understanding on where it is going. But until then, we are stuck in this weird transition period where political polarization, inequality and dystopia will only accelerate. You need a solid understanding of this process if you want to escape it, because it will get more and more difficult every single year, and at one point it will be too late. Just the mere concept of decline is difficult to convey to a generation which grew up without knowing real war, never seen any famine and don't know real suffering. They got born into one of the best times ever and don't know anything else. Their entire worldview, culture and subconscious beliefs are built around this notion that the West will stay on top forever. But it won't. The West, and especially Europe's problem, started a long while ago when the West developed this arrogant notion, whether intentional or subconsciously, that they are too good to do the dirty work, like manufacturing clothing, shoes and mining rare earth minerals. That's something the global south should do for us, right? And while third world countries are busy with all the dangerous bullshit, Europeans can finally focus on science, music, art and culture. But now this is backfiring because their entire industry has moved abroad. But me, the individual, did not decide to outsource my own job to poor countries. It's those greedy corporations. Yes, you are right from an individual standpoint. But today's video is about zooming out and looking at the big picture. Looking at the West, how other countries look at the West. And now it's my individual responsibility to think about how to react. How to benefit from all the bullshit. And this only works with a clear and solid model of the world. When explaining this model, especially the part about how Europe is declining the fastest, people interrupt me with some cherry-picked thing which is still good about Europe. But ASML in the Netherlands and some other big company in Europe. Doesn't matter, those are rare examples in small countries and Europe doesn't have enough of these types of companies to move the needle. Germany is still living off the wealth it has created decades ago. Old companies. And no, the likes of Spotify are not playing in the same league as American companies. This decline is noticeable across all of Europe, even in so-called poster child socialist countries like the Scandinavian ones. They may be a few years behind when it comes to decline of living standards, but they still suffer from the same systematic problems like the rest of Europe. Rising inequality, housing prices, low birth rates and so on. The only thing mitigating these effects is the fact that poor countries supply rich countries with slave labor. So Westerners feel richer than they actually are. And if you don't believe me, just go into any shopping mall in any European first world country and try to find clothing that was not made in poor countries. That's why it's pretty arrogant when Europeans proclaim their own political system as superior, because they still rely on other countries being poor. Imagine you have two neighborhoods, right? One is the poor one where all the stuff is being made and all the pollution happens. The other one is the rich neighborhood, which benefits from everything and pretends to be superior. Those uncivilized plebs still have not learned how superior our system is. Yeah, all they need to become rich like us is a gay democracy. That will give them infinite growth. And now China has Europe by the balls because the European Union can't produce anything. The media there tries to cope by showing how their CO2 emissions have improved as compared to the bad and evil China. But the reality is that China's CO2 footprint is only that bad because they produce all the bullshit the West consumes. And on top of that, German energy costs keep rising thanks to brand new bullshit laws like CO2 tariffs and environmental housing standards, which are getting stricter every single year. This may sound great to people who are completely detached from reality, but it causes middle-class people to sell their houses because upgrading to these new standards is just too expensive. And who are they selling to? To richer people who can still afford it. But even those richer people, as long as this bullshit continues, will later have to sell to even wealthier people. Redistribution of wealth to the top, erasure of the middle class. But when grandma is pushed into selling her house, all the so-called pro-middle class leftists are celebrating. Why? Because in their view, grandma's house is allegedly too large for her alone, and the CO2 footprint is bad. So if grandma sells this house, the leftists see this as a win-win situation. But the only situation is now that she has to rent back her own house from somebody who is richer than she is. And this can be, for example, some greedy real estate corporation. This is how you do class warfare. And the average Joe just stands there and celebrates because modern neoliberalism now has gay rainbow colors. So many people think the solution to this entire bullshit is to just give the government even more money by taxing the rich. This could, maybe at most, buy you a few more years, but the problem is you cannot tax yourself out of a dying system. The only practical and realistic solution to this situation is for you to find a way to save your own ass